It started with a letter, then another, and another. Millions of Americans opening their mailboxes to find the same cold message printed in sterile corporate font. Your personal information may have been compromised. Some laughed it off, others froze their credit. But deep down, everyone felt it, the quiet unease of being seen. Somewhere, someone now knew everything about them. Their name, their debts, their first car loan, their mother's maiden name. In the months that followed, fake accounts appeared. Mortgages opened in strangers' names. Lives rewritten with a few stolen keystrokes. It wasn't just a data breach. It was a mass identity collapse, a moment when 147 million people realized that their financial lives weren't owned by them anymore. And as investigators dug deeper, they discovered something far more alarming. This wasn't theft, it was surveillance. And the people behind it weren't hackers for hire. They were soldiers. But how did it happen? How could a single breach unravel the financial identity of half a nation? Silently, invisibly, and without a single line of ransom demand. To understand that, you have to go back to the beginning, back to a company that most Americans never dealt with directly, but that quietly held the keys to their financial lives. For over a century, Equifax has quietly sat at the heart of the American financial system. You don't think about it when you buy a car, apply for a mortgage, or sign up for a credit card, but Equifax knows. It always knows. Your income, your debts, your missed payments, your loans, all stored in its labyrinth of databases. 3 companies dominate this invisible industry: Experian, TransUnion, and Equifax. They are the unseen referees of American credit. But in 2017, Equifax wasn't just powerful, it was complacent. The company had been expanding fast, integrating new databases, new systems, new cloud interfaces. It was messy, disorganized, and critically, it was outdated. Somewhere deep inside their infrastructure sat a piece of open-source software called Apache Struts, a web application framework used to build and manage online services. In March 2017, a security bulletin was issued to the world. Critical vulnerability in Apache Struts. Patch immediately. Cybersecurity teams across the globe scrambled. Most companies patched within days, but not Equifax. The alert was missed, ignored, or buried in bureaucracy, lost somewhere in the endless maze of corporate emails and ticketing systems. For nearly 4 months, that vulnerability remained open. A back door waiting to be discovered. And someone did discover it. It began quietly, likely in late May or early June. A small, seemingly harmless scan of Equifax's online dispute portal, the kind consumers use to challenge errors on their credit reports. The attackers probed it, analyzed it, and then slipped through. Once inside, they moved carefully, patiently. They didn't crash systems or encrypt data like ransomware gangs. They watched, they mapped. Using encrypted tunnels, they exfiltrated data slowly. So slowly, it looked like normal network traffic. Over 75 days, they siphoned names, addresses, social security numbers, driver's licenses, and birth dates. The treasure chest of a nation's identity. By the time Equifax's security team noticed suspicious network traffic on July 29, it was far too late. The data was gone. What followed was chaos disguised as calm. Executives locked down information. For weeks, the company stayed silent, even as some senior officials quietly sold millions in stock before the news became public. When the breach was finally announced on September 7, 2017, the reaction was immediate and explosive. Markets tanked. Lawsuits erupted. And millions of Americans learned that their entire financial lives had been stolen, not by thieves seeking money, but by something far more organized. Because behind the screen, this wasn't the work of lone hackers in basements. It was the work of the People's Liberation Army of China, 4 military officers operating under state orders. In 2020, the U.S. Department of Justice charged them with one of the largest data thefts in history. Their names: Wu Ziyang, Wang Qin, Xu Ke, and Liu Lei. Their mission: steal the DNA of American finance. But how did China's military end up inside the servers of one of America's most powerful credit agencies? And what were they really after? The breach was not random. It was calculated, clinical, and patient, an operation months in the making. To the attackers, Equifax was not just a company, it was a gold mine of identity. Unlike banks that store account numbers, Equifax held something deeper: immutable data, things that could never be changed. Your name, your birthday, your social security number. That meant one successful infiltration could yield power for decades. The attackers began by slipping in through the unpatched Apache Struts vulnerability, a bug so notorious it was already being exploited by smaller cyber gangs. But this wasn't a smash and grab. Once inside, they established persistence, hidden footholds that let them return even if Equifax tried to shut them out. Then they scanned internal servers like predators stalking prey. Each step was disguised as legitimate traffic. The hackers used encrypted channels and mimicked normal data flows, blending in like ghosts moving through cables. Slow, silent, invisible. Over the course of 75 days, they extracted over 200,000 database queries, pulling terabytes of data in fragments so small they wouldn't trigger alarms. When investigators later reconstructed the breach, they found that the attackers used 19 separate servers to receive stolen data, all routed through obscure networks in multiple countries. By the time Equifax's analysts finally spotted an anomaly in July 2017, outbound traffic to an unknown IP, the hackers were already leaving. They wiped traces as they went. No ransomware, no messages, no calling card, just silence. And in that silence, 147 million lives had changed. When the breach was finally disclosed to the public in September, the scale was incomprehensible. Names, social security numbers, birth dates, addresses, driver's license numbers, and in some cases, credit card details. Almost half of the U.S. population exposed. In New York, lawmakers called emergency meetings. In Washington, senators demanded accountability. And across millions of homes, Americans searched their names online and found them listed on dark web forums, traded like currency. The outrage was instant. Equifax's CEO, Richard Smith, was hauled before Congress, grilled under oath. "How could this happen?" a lawmaker asked. Smith's answer was chilling in its simplicity: a failure to patch a known vulnerability. A patch that had been available for months. The hearings became a spectacle. Senators compared the incident to leaving the front door open to America's financial house. Smith resigned shortly after, followed by a wave of executives. But the damage was already done. Credit monitoring services couldn't undo what had been stolen. You can change your password, but not your birthday, not your social security number. This wasn't just identity theft, it was identity permanence. Even worse, many victims didn't even know Equifax had their data to begin with. They never consented. They never signed up. Their information was collected silently as part of an invisible system that determines your worthiness for loans, housing, and even jobs. Now that system was compromised, not by accident, but by foreign intelligence. In 2020, the Department of Justice unsealed indictments against 4 members of China's People's Liberation Army, Unit 61398, the same cyber unit previously linked to attacks on U.S. companies and government agencies. The DOJ accused them of stealing not just consumer data, but Equifax's proprietary database designs and algorithms, the blueprints of how America's financial identity works. It wasn't about money. It was about knowledge. Knowing how the U.S. credit system functions meant knowing how to exploit it, how to model it, how to use it for intelligence. FBI Director Christopher Wray called it a reckless and sweeping intrusion. But privately, agents admitted something darker, that this might not have been a standalone breach. It could be part of a pattern, a decades-long effort to compile a digital dossier on an entire population. The U.S. Office of Personnel Management, OPM, had already been hacked in 2015, exposing data on government employees. Anthem, the health insurer, was hit around the same time. Now, with Equifax, the puzzle was complete. Health, employment, finance, every vital thread of American identity, all quietly mapped, cataloged, and stored. But what happens when the private data of a nation becomes a weapon? What happens when identity itself, your birth date, your credit score, your past, becomes part of a global intelligence war? The answers began to unfold in the months that followed as investigators traced digital fingerprints back across continents and found something that changed the way America viewed cybersecurity forever. In the world of cyber forensics, evidence doesn't come in fingerprints or gunpowder. It comes in code, tiny, cryptic patterns of behavior that reveal who pulled the digital trigger. Inside the FBI's cyber division, agents and analysts worked around the clock to reconstruct the attack. Every server log, every packet, every access request was a clue. The goal wasn't just to find how the hackers got in, but who they were. And the deeper they dug, the clearer the picture became. Hidden within the stolen data's transmission patterns were distinctive signatures, IP addresses bouncing through servers in multiple countries, but originating from a familiar region, Shanghai. There, within the military's cyber infrastructure, operated a shadow unit known to U.S. intelligence as PLA Unit 61398, a branch of China's People's Liberation Army specializing in digital espionage. It had been linked to attacks on American corporations before, Westinghouse, U.S. Steel, and even NASA. But this was different. It wasn't about stealing blueprints or trade secrets. It was about people. The hackers hadn't just stolen data, they had stolen context. They now possessed enough information to impersonate, profile, or blackmail virtually any American adult. They could map entire family trees through shared addresses and last names. They could connect financial behaviors to political affiliations. They could build the kind of sociological intelligence that governments dream of and free nations fear. In one classified report, a cybersecurity analyst described it chillingly. They didn't just steal who we are, they stole how we live. Meanwhile, public trust in Equifax collapsed. The company tried to offer free credit monitoring, but critics called it a joke, a PR bandage over a wound that would never heal. Dozens of lawsuits piled up, and eventually, Equifax agreed to a $700 million settlement, one of the largest in U.S. history. Yet the settlement couldn't erase the deeper truth, that for millions of Americans, identity theft was no longer a threat, it was a fact. And the hackers? Untouched, safe, across the ocean under the protection of their government. The 4 named officers, Wu Ziyang, Wang Chen, Xu Ke, and Lu Lei, were celebrated quietly within Chinese circles for their data operations. When the DOJ unsealed the indictments in 2020, their photos were broadcast worldwide. But everyone in the intelligence community knew what it really meant. They'd never see the inside of a courtroom. Inside the FBI briefing room, a senior investigator summed it up. This wasn't a robbery. This was reconnaissance. For years, the PLA had been mapping America's soft spots: infrastructure, corporations, individuals. And Equifax gave them something none of those previous hacks had: a population-level data set. It was the holy grail of modern intelligence, the ability to understand an entire country at the level of individual humans. Financial habits, employment trends, geographic clusters of wealth and debt, all now sitting on servers thousands of miles away. The implications were staggering. Imagine using that data to predict markets, target recruitment for espionage, or craft disinformation tailored to financial pain points. This wasn't science fiction, it was strategic reality. Back in Washington, policymakers scrambled to respond. Hearings were held, statements issued, promises made. But behind the curtain, there was quiet panic. If one of the most powerful financial data companies in America could fall so easily, who was next? Equifax wasn't just a breach, it was a revelation. It exposed not only the fragility of American cybersecurity, but the illusion of control. Because Equifax didn't fail due to some brilliant zero-day exploit or elite cyber weapon. It failed because someone didn't click update, a patch ignored, a notification lost. A simple act of human negligence that opened a door to global espionage. And that, perhaps, was the most terrifying truth of all. That the downfall of a system protecting hundreds of millions wasn't caused by malice, but by apathy. Yet even in the aftermath, as public outrage faded, something else began to stir. A reckoning inside the halls of government and the private sector. New cybersecurity frameworks were developed. Companies began hiring chief information security officers, roles that barely existed before. And cyber hygiene became the new mantra of modern defense. But it was too late to unring the bell. The Equifax breach had already rewritten the playbook. It marked the moment when Americans learned that privacy wasn't stolen overnight. It was surrendered bit by bit by those entrusted to guard it. And somewhere in a server room in Shanghai, a quiet database still hums, filled with the names, birthdays, and lives of 147 million people. A silent monument to what happens when vigilance fades. By 2018, Equifax had become a symbol not of innovation or finance, but of failure. The company's once sterile offices were flooded with auditors, lawyers, and FBI agents. The air inside buzzed with the low hum of hard drives being imaged, emails being sifted, secrets being unearthed. Every file told a story of what went wrong. Missed warnings, delayed updates, miscommunication between departments. A security culture where no one felt responsible until it was far too late. Forensic reports later revealed that multiple employees knew about the Apache Struts vulnerability but assumed someone else had handled it. The alert was sent to the wrong inbox. The patching protocol was never verified. And one missed follow-up email, became the thread that unraveled the financial privacy of half a nation. The most advanced military hackers in the world didn't need to break down walls. They just had to walk through a door that was left open. The human cost was staggering, though invisible. Families who discovered fraudulent loans in their names. Victims who couldn't qualify for mortgages because their credit scores had been destroyed by debts they never took. Elderly citizens whose identities were sold and resold in dark markets. Credit monitoring couldn't fix it. Fraud alerts couldn't stop it. For many, the only solution was to freeze their credit permanently, locking their identities in a cage they could no longer fully use. And the cruel irony? Equifax profited from the panic. In the months following the breach, millions paid for new premium protection plans, sold by the same company that had failed to protect them in the first place. It was the equivalent of selling umbrellas during a storm you caused. In Congress, the outrage was palpable. Lawmakers tore into executives in televised hearings, their voices sharp with disbelief. "Mr. Smith," one senator demanded, "you had one job: to protect Americans' data. Why should anyone ever trust you again?" The former CEO sat in silence, hands folded, eyes fixed downward. His answers were rehearsed, but his face told another story: fatigue, regret, and quiet ruin. The kind that doesn't come from being caught, but from realizing you could have stopped it. Outside the marble halls of Washington, a different war was brewing. A new kind of arms race, not of missiles or tanks, but of firewalls and encryption keys. Cyber warfare was no longer theory, it was policy. The Equifax hack had drawn an invisible battle line across the digital world. It told every government, every corporation, and every hacker something chillingly clear: information is the new weapon, and whoever controls it controls everything. In Beijing, U.S. intelligence analysts believe the data from Equifax joined an ocean of other stolen archives, OPM records, health data, travel patterns, forming a mosaic of American life, a map of human vulnerability. It wasn't about targeting individuals. It was about understanding a population, predicting it, influencing it. But the most haunting question remained: could it happen again? The truth, experts said, was yes, and probably already had. Because the Equifax breach wasn't a one-time failure. It was a symptom of something far larger, a global system built on fragile code, outdated infrastructure, and human complacency. Cybersecurity expert Bruce Schneier called it a perfect storm of negligence and inevitability. The kind of event that doesn't just happen once. It happens repeatedly until the world finally learns. But has it learned? In 2020, the Department of Justice's announcement brought momentary vindication, the naming of the 4 PLA officers. But indictments are symbolic. They don't bring justice. They send a message. Standing before cameras, U.S. Attorney General William Barr declared, "This is not just theft. It's state-sponsored espionage that affects every American household." Behind him, images of the 4 Chinese officers flickered on screen, grainy portraits of men who would likely never face trial. They were ghosts, protected, untouchable. But their work had already reshaped the world. The breach became a lesson taught in every cybersecurity course. A cautionary tale told in government briefings, a permanent stain on corporate history. And yet, beyond all the technology, beyond the politics and blame, the Equifax breach was something profoundly human, a story of trust, complacency, and consequence. A reminder that even the strongest systems are built by flawed people, and that those flaws can ripple through generations. In the years since, Equifax has tried to rebuild. They've spent billions on security upgrades, encryption, and monitoring. But trust? Trust isn't something you can patch. To this day, 147 million Americans live with the shadow of that breach, their information scattered, replicated, traded, and archived somewhere beyond reach. And maybe, somewhere in a government facility halfway across the world, that data still hums on a server. Quiet, encrypted, waiting. Not stolen for money, but for power, for knowledge. Because in the 21st century, identity itself has become the ultimate weapon. By the time the dust settled, Equifax had spent over $1 billion rebuilding its reputation. New leadership, new cybersecurity teams, new promises. But deep down, everyone knew the damage couldn't be undone. You can't put a lock on a door after the world's already walked through it. The Equifax breach wasn't just a story about stolen data. It was a mirror held up to the modern world, showing us what happens when information becomes both a currency and a weapon. Because what was truly stolen wasn't just identity. It was trust. Trust in the invisible systems that shape our financial lives. Trust in corporations that promise protection but run on profit. Trust in governments that vow retaliation but struggle to adapt to a war fought in silence. In the aftermath, the phrase cybersecurity hygiene became the new gospel. Companies across the globe scrambled to hire experts, encrypt servers, and audit vulnerabilities. But the underlying truth remained. Humans are always the weakest link, and in that weakness lies the fragility of our connected world. For the ordinary American, the effects were far more personal. A woman in Ohio discovered her identity had been used to rent apartments in 3 different states. A veteran in Texas found loans in his name totaling $85,000. A single mother in Florida couldn't buy a car because someone else had already defaulted on hers. These weren't headlines. These were lives, quietly rewritten by strangers halfway across the world. Every email, every transaction, every form of verification now carried a new shadow of doubt. People learned to mistrust the very systems they depended on. Meanwhile, in intelligence circles, the Equifax breach became a cautionary landmark, a chapter in the slow evolution of cyber warfare. It wasn't the first time a foreign power infiltrated American data systems, but it was the first time the target wasn't military or industrial or political. It was personal. The logic was brutal and brilliant. If you want to understand a nation, you don't hack its government. You hack its people. And so, in the following years, data became the new terrain of global conflict, stolen not in explosions, but in quiet uploads. The victims, often, never even knew they were at war. By 2025, the Equifax breach still stands as one of the largest data thefts in human history. 147 million people, more than the population of Japan, all exposed because one company missed one patch. It is the kind of mistake that redefines an era. Because the Equifax hack didn't just reveal the vulnerability of a corporation, it revealed the vulnerability of civilization itself. We built a digital world faster than we learned to protect it. And in doing so, we created something far more fragile than we'd ever imagined. In the end, perhaps the real story isn't about Equifax at all. It's about us. Our hunger for convenience. Our blind faith in systems we don't understand. Our willingness to trade privacy for speed, trust for simplicity, security for comfort. Because the truth is, every password we save, every form we autofill, every device we connect, it's another thread tying us to a web we no longer control. And sometimes it takes a breach of 147 million identities to remind us. The real danger isn't out there, lurking in the dark web. It's inside the world we built, one that runs on data and forgets the cost of losing it. The breach began with silence, a simple warning ignored. It ended with revelation, the realization that in the digital age, the line between safety and catastrophe is only ever a single click away. And maybe that's the legacy of Equifax. Not just the hack that exposed a nation, but the moment the world finally realized that the most powerful weapon of the 21st century is information itself. If you enjoyed this story, hit like and subscribe for more real stories from the digital world. Don't forget to tap the bell icon so you never miss what's next.